All right, just doing a few things to make sure the stream's working. All right, we'll get started in a couple of minutes. Sorry if I'm looking down. I'm looking at the chat as I'm doing this. All right, we'll go ahead and get started in a couple of minutes. So if you want to join the chat and ask questions, I know you do need to, I believe, have a YouTube channel, so you may need to go through a sign up process if you want to do that and chat. Basically, I wanted to make this a live show to get some, eventually get some interactivity to see what kind of questions people would be interested in based upon the topic I'm presenting. As you can tell today, I'm presenting what is HTML, basically how to read it, how to understand it, and potentially we're going to even be writing some. My name, as you can tell, is Preston Jameson, and the show is called Advancement Tech. So Advancement Tech means the technology of advancement, and advancement has to do basically with institutions in terms of fundraising or sometimes alumni relations, those responsibilities for advancing the institution. So that's pretty much what we're going to be talking about, technology as it relates to advancement or nonprofits. Yes, I see some people in the chat. Welcome. Thanks for joining. So again, we'll go ahead and get started in about 1 more minute. And if you ever have problems hearing me or questions, go ahead and mention it in the chat, and I'll try to catch it. All right, so it's about time. I'm going to go ahead and get started. So again, welcome. Thank you for attending. So I'm going to mention a little bit of a background about me, so you kind of understand where I'm coming from. I'm going to have about 15 to 20 minutes of educational content, and at the end, of course, we'll have a Q&A. Although if there's something, I'll try to keep an eye on the chat, and if a question comes up, I'll try to address it. Okay, so who am I? All right, my name is Preston Jameson. I've worked at 2 different universities over the last 15 years, and not the recent years. It was a few years ago when I was doing that. Basically, I oversaw development and advancement services. My last position was a CIO of the foundation. Since then, I've founded a company and basically developed a product called Advancement Form. And it essentially provides online giving and event registration services for advancement offices. Okay, so to get started, let's look at, okay, what is HTML? So generally, start with a definition. So HTML is hypertext markup language. So basically, it's a language. It's a means of communicating something. And markup means you mark it up to define different content in it. Maybe you say this particular content needs to be a header, this particular content needs to be within a paragraph. And the term hypertext kind of implies it's active text, and it's basically the term given to hyperlinks or the links that carry you to a different web page or even a different website. So that's kind of what HTML comes from. It's basically a lot of the language of the web pages that you see every day. Everything is written in HTML. Now here's an example of some HTML. It has the content, hello world, and then it has this markup here. So you'll see that there's a P tag, which means a paragraph, and usually it has an opening tag and then a closing tag. There are some tags that don't open and close. There's just one tag, but in this example, there's an opening and a closing tag. Okay, so when you think of HTML, you need to think of it in terms of responsible for carrying or communicating the content and maybe some context around it. So the text that you see, that's what HTML is recording. If you're thinking about the styling, that is generally cascading style sheets or CSS, which is incidentally the next topic we're going to be covering next Friday. So HTML is written using tags that can contain one or more attributes for each tag. So in this example, we have an H1 tag, which means a header 1 tag. And again, it has an opening and a closing tag. And optionally, you can place within the opening tag, you can place attributes. So for example, one of the attributes you can add is class. And usually this is used a lot for targeting particular HTML to be styled a certain way if you're using CSS, or to be for JavaScript to be able to identify and do something with it dynamically. Some other attributes that are common are ID that you'll see, which is a unique identifier. With a class, you can have more than one HTML tag with a class, but ID, that should be a unique identifier for a given tag on a single HTML page. And you can see that it contains the content in here, my title. So this is an example of another tag that is an A tag. And as you can see, it's an A tag. It opens and closes. It has the attribute href. So this is the hyperlink reference for it. And in here, it defines what website you're going to or what page that you're going to. Now, what that link will look like is actually the content inside. Much like when you're looking at a header, the content inside would be my title. That's what you would actually see. In here for the link, it would be called link, and then it would be clickable. The browser would look at this A tag and know to make that a clickable link. Okay, so we're going to jump into doing some live coding now. Okay, so I have this, it's essentially a text document, but I actually renamed the extension HTML so that when I double click it, it will open. So if you look at the browser here, it's actually looking at a file on the C drive of my computer. I'm using a Windows computer now, and it's basically saying I open this file called hello.html. So you can create your own text file, and actually the browser will read it if you go ahead and attempt to open it using that browser. Now this looks very basic. All it says is hello world. So let's actually go back, and I'm going to also open this. I right-clicked it, do an open with a notepad. So this is what this file contains. It just says hello world. Now we can make it more interesting, and let's put it in H1 tag. And if I save that and I go back and look at the browser, now it's suddenly bold. And I can add additional content too. So if we add a paragraph tag, again, close it. And it just added that text in and within a paragraph tag. So it's not that sophisticated. You could easily just go in and start typing HTML and a browser will read it. Okay, so now I want to take a look at some HTML HTML on this particular site. So if you're starting to want to use HTML or understand it better, this is a great site in my opinion to go to. It is ad supported, but the ads are not overly onerous in particular. And so I'm just looking at w3schools.com HTML. And it has a good example here of what a full page HTML document contains. So it's fine to just type HTML and that's okay, but really you would want to use this type of layout if you're creating an HTML document. Basically instructing the browser that's going to look at it, you want a particular doc type HTML. Oh, my apologies, you're not seeing the document. Thank you for that. My apologies. Okay, so there is a bit of a delay. Can you see the document now as well as the HTML? Okay, so my apologies for that. Okay, so this was basically the HTML I was typing here. So for example, I typed H1, put a hello world, and then closing H1 tag, and it added some text, and if I remove this, I could make it just as an example, I could make it HTML5, save it. And now it makes it a header 5, which is by default the browser interprets it as a smaller header. So it looks like that. And I can continue just to type in this document and build out the HTML. But as I was saying is that this particular site, w3schools.com, is a great resource. And as you're learning HTML or want to know more, it's a good one to reference to ask, what can a different tag do in HTML, or what are some of the attributes for it? Oh, it went away again. Are you seeing the browser? Okay, I'm going to have to keep checking this. My apologies. Okay, so we should be seeing the browser now. Sorry for the technical difficulties. This is the first time for this, so we'll see how we're going. Okay, so this is the site I was talking about, w3schools.com, and it has this example of an HTML document. So as you can see here, I'm seeing if it worked now. Okay, it does. I do see it. So when you're typing this document, this is something you can do, and you can get the HTML to appear in a browser. However, you really want to follow the standard for an HTML page that they list here. So they're talking about a doc type, which instructs the browser what type of document it's going to be receiving, because it can be an HTML document or an XML document or other types of documents. Now, what you'll also see here is it defines an HTML open tag and an HTML close tag. So everything within here, it's basically instructing the browser, this is HTML. It also has a title, which is very important. This title is what appears in the top of your browser tabs. So if you want the title to be different, you can change it to something else. Like this page title is HTML tutorial. And this itself is in a head tag. Now a head tag is not visible on the page. So any information you put here is usually references to tagging it with something or including JavaScript with your HTML or including CSS with your HTML. But it's not going to show on the actual page. And then you have the body section, and here is the area that will appear on your page. So this has an H1 tag, this is a heading, and a paragraph tag, this is a paragraph. Okay, and just let's look at something a little bit different. Let's look at HTML, an HTML table. And I'm going to go ahead and click on the try it yourself mark here. And it's going to open this is what the HTML looks like, and then this is how it renders. So again, you have the doc type, the HTML, the head tag. We'll have some styles up here that actually make it styled the way it's looking. We're not going to cover that today, but just so you know, these styles are what are making it appear shaded every other row. But here's just basically HTML that is drawing this. So it's defining a table tag. TR means a table row. TH means a table header, so it's company. And then the table row of data each has a table data element. So each of the row of information in 3 columns, 1, 2, 3, are listed here with all of the data. So again, this is a great site to reference and kind of better understand HTML. Now, for an example, I'm going to jump into my website here. So this is the advancement form website. And I'm going to go ahead and right-click it. And again, you can do this in different browsers. I'm using Chrome. And I'm going to say View Page Source. Now, depending on the website you look like, it could be very intimidating because there's an awful lot of HTML used to build a site. But again, fundamentally, they're pretty much all the same. You'll see the doc type reference that we saw before. You'll see this is the HTML tag, but it has an additional attribute, language in English. And then here is the head portion. Again, this is the portion that's not shown on the page, but its responsibility is for loading things like fonts. So you can see there's some fonts being pulled in. For doing styling, there's a style sheet. There is an image for what's called a favicon, which is what this little icon is in the top you'll see in your browser tab, as well as scripts. So there's some different JavaScript that's usually gets loaded in the head, although sometimes it's at the end. And then you have the body tag here, and this starts the visible portion of the HTML. Now, a lot of times you're going to see a lot of div tags to divide up different sections of the HTML. And you'll see a very prominent in a lot of designs, there's a lot of classes, so classifying this div and that div. But it depends on how some of the HTML is structured, what you're going to be seeing. But a reason for that is a lot of it uses styling to really narrow down and come up with a structure of the page. And you'll see different elements like UL is an unordered list, and then each list item is within it. Now, just looking at this HTML again is very intimidating, but there's an easier way, I think, if you're trying to understand some HTML or target something to achieve a certain effect, is that you can actually right-click it and inspect an individual element. So if I go here and I right-click on this area and do inspect, it's going to actually open up some development tools in your browser. Now, this may appear in the right side or at the bottom. However, it's showing you in this element section, it shows you exactly where I right-click. Now, it's scrolled down a little bit. But if I hover over it, you'll see online giving is highlighted when I'm hovering it there. And so this is an H5 element, and it has this little drop down. I can look inside and say, okay, this is the H5 tag, and within it, it says online giving. And if I scroll down a little bit more, I can see, okay, this paragraph tag contains this content, boost your online giving with our customized solutions. And it even has an A tag, which basically takes you to the features with a particular area of the giving features using an A tag that is shown as learn more. So any area of the page you want to look at, you can actually right click to get a better sense of it. And even just scrolling down and looking through, you can see which sections are appropriate to each area. So if I hover over this, I can see, okay, this is a section tag, and it has a particular container, and I can look at the row. And again, it depends on the HTML structure, but you can get a sense of, okay, here's the image tag producing list, and then this is the HTML and how it's structured in here. Okay, so now one way you may be using HTML now is that maybe you have a content management system where you're using a what you see is what you get interface, or a WYSIWYG interface. And so for example, advancement form supports this for entering HTML information. So this is the advancement form application, and you can insert a field that contains HTML. So if I go in and edit this particular HTML field, you'll see that it has this is actually an H1 that says heading. There's a paragraph tag with additional text. And I'm telling you this, but basically I designed it using this what you see is what you get interface. So this is a bold section. This is an H1 section. I created a table. But again, it's all just HTML in the background. And this particular interface has this considered a code icon. And if I click it, it actually shows me the code that it's generating. So even though I'm clicking buttons to create the HTML, at the end of the day, all it's producing is this code in the background. So it's saying, here's an H1, and make it the heading of H1, and then do a P tag and put some text in it, make it bold around the text, which is what it's doing here, making it bold around the text. That's what the B is doing. And then it has the table tag. It did assign a particular class to it, do a table body, table row. So everything that it's doing is actually creating HTML. Okay. So that's pretty much an introductory to what is HTML and how you can do a little bit of coding with it and kind of understanding how it works. So at this stage, do we have any questions on kind of what was covered in this brief tutorial? So I'll just look for the chat and see if anybody has any questions. Now, just to let you know, while I'm doing that, the next upcoming show is What is CSS? And that'll be next Friday at 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Following that, the next week on February 8th will be What is JavaScript? And then after that point, I'll be covering kind of based upon people who are enjoying these shows, kind of what would they like to see next. I, of course, have some ideas, but I like to understand kind of what technical topic the audience would like to think about next. Okay, so in terms of centering things, question about centering things, that is usually considered styling. So there is a style, although I'll talk about a little bit in regard with the CSS introduction, but you can do a style tag in some cases, although some WYSIWYG editors may not use it. But there is a way to do it. And in terms of advancement form, some of the questions with regard to advancement form, we can talk about that a little bit later. But just speaking from an HTML perspective, there is a CSS style. So this is kind of a preview maybe for what we'll cover next week. And there is a value for it called center. So you can see within the page, it just centered hello world. And I will make that an H1. So it'll appear up. I see I know what I did. All right. I know what I'm doing wrong now. That causes the screen to go away. I will fix that for next week. All right. I'll wait for the screen to refresh here. Okay. So, going back to this, so again, you usually don't use a style. Normally, you would assign a class to do it and then write the CSS to do it. But just from an HTML perspective, this is a way you can get it in. There's styling called text align that you can set to center. You can also, and if you look at the HTML, I wonder if they have this style here somewhere. Well, there's various different ways to center it, but if you're looking to do text, that's the main way to do it with a style. And we can actually see how to do it with CSS that then applies it to a style of the class. So we can look at doing that next week. All right, so any other questions or anything anybody else would like to know? Or like, were you looking for something more in depth, or was this a good level? So I guess that's some feedback if you don't have any questions, that would be some feedback that would be beneficial to know. Was this too basic, or was it too advanced, or was it about right for what people were looking for? If you could let me know in the chat, I would definitely appreciate that. So the question was, will this video remain on YouTube? Can I send my colleagues here to view it? Absolutely. So again, this is the first one, and I'm new to doing things live on YouTube, but it should be posted within a number of hours, the live stream, and it should show the chat as well. However, failing that, I am recording it, so I can upload the video later. So it will definitely be available on the YouTube channel. And to get to it, there is a link, advtech.tv, that will actually bring you to the show page here. And it will it will eventually be updated with the upcoming show, as well as the historical shows will be shown down below. And it will take you to YouTube, where you can be able to view any recorded sessions. All right, well, we are at about 4:30, so I know it's a Friday. Thank you all for joining me. I wanted to do 3 or 4 of these shows and then gauge audience interest on the timing. Does this timing work well for people who are interested in viewing it, or should it be moved to any particular time? But right now, we'll do 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on Fridays. And want to be sure to value your time that, I'm getting ready for the weekend and whatnot. So I'll go ahead and close it out here in terms of new content. I will hang around the chat for another 5 minutes to see if anybody else has anything they want to ask. So thank you very much for joining me today.